I wasn't planning on speaking. Not at that party, not to that crowd. But when the microphone was passed my way, I knew silence would have been worse. 3 hours earlier, I was standing in front of the mirror in a hotel suite in Manhattan, smoothing out the burgundy satin fabric of my dress and reminding myself to keep my head high no matter what. My hair was done, makeup soft, earrings subtle. If I had to be present, I was going to be polished. The engagement party was for my cousin Serena. She was 28, glowing and perfectly slotted into everything the family adored. Engaged to a second-gen doctor with a house in Westchester and an Audi in the driveway. Their love story apparently began at Columbia Med School. It was everything my family wanted for me but never got. I was 33, single according to them, and working in a field no one could quite define. Something with branding, my uncle once said, then shrugged. I had built a multi-six-figure consulting business, traveling between Europe and the Gulf, working with clients bigger than any name my family could recognize. But to them, I was still figuring it out. Lucien and I had been together for almost 3 years. He was a logistical genius in aviation infrastructure, spoke 4 languages, and made me laugh when I was mid-cry. But he'd only met one person in my family, and not by design. I had kept our relationship private, not because I was ashamed, but because I knew what they'd say. And last week, when I told my mom we'd be in town during the holidays, her response wasn't "can't wait to see you." It was, "Maybe your imaginary boyfriend can finally join us. Wouldn't that be something?" She ended it with a smiley face emoji like that made it better. It didn't. Lucien had meetings in Montreal and Dubai that week. The plan was always for him to meet me in New York afterward. But when my mom sent the engagement invite and literally included a handwritten note on the back, RSVP for 1 or 2? Or should we wait for your unicorn fiancé to RSVP himself? I knew something in me had snapped. He told me he'd do whatever I wanted. Come, skip it, land in the middle. I told him, just show up. Be late if you have to. I'll handle the rest. So there I was. I walked into the ballroom solo. Velvet chairs, champagne towers, fake laughter echoing through chandeliers. My mother spotted me and waved as if nothing had happened. As if her joke hadn't reached half the family already. I smiled. I always do. But as the evening went on, the whispers got louder. Still alone. Did she say he works in aviation? Does she mean Uber? She's so pretty though. I don't understand. I moved through them like a ghost. Kiss cheeks. Pose for pictures. Dodge the auntie who always smells like patchouli in judgment. Then I heard it. I was near the dessert table, reaching for a spoonful of creme brulee when my name floated over the murmur. My mother's voice, sharp, amused, deadly. She said he's in aviation, she was saying to my aunt. But who knows? Maybe she meant he flies kites. Laughter. Then my cousin's mom chimed in. I told Raj he probably doesn't exist. Honestly, sometimes I think she makes these men up to feel better at family events. And then the clincher from my mother. Well, at least her imaginary boyfriend won't break her heart. Can't break what's not real. They laughed. Full-bellied, unbothered, brazen. Like it was some reality TV episode and I was just a character to mock. I froze. Spoon in midair. Smile plastered but hollow. I could have walked away. I wanted to. But something in me refused. So I stayed. I didn't cry. Not then. Not there. I stood by the window for a while, watching the snow begin to fall outside. It looked like peace. It didn't feel like peace. Then someone tapped my shoulder. They're about to do speeches. You should say a few words. I turned. The event coordinator smiled like she'd done me a favor. Great. Minutes later, mic in hand, I looked out at the sea of family, friends, doctors, lawyers, everyone dressed like confidence and smelling like validation. All eyes on me. All waiting for me to stumble. I smiled. Tonight is beautiful, I began. Celebrating Serena and Mark feels easy because it's honest. Because love that is seen and supported is powerful. Not everyone gets that. If you do, don't take it for granted. There were polite claps. Some awkward nods. And then, a sound, faint at first. A low mechanical rumble. Not a helicopter, no, but close. It was the sound of the rooftop elevator descending. Private access, top floor only. The noise was unfamiliar here. It turned heads. People began murmuring. A few stood. And then he appeared. Lucien. Slim-fit white tuxedo jacket. Black trousers. No tie. Just a subtle watch and the calm of a man who never has to raise his voice to be heard. He stepped through the side arch, eyes scanning, smile slow and deliberate. "Apologies," he said, voice smooth. "I got stuck between time zones and too many dessert options." Laughter. Confused. Nervous. Disbelieving. He walked over to me, kissed my cheek like it was just another Tuesday and whispered, "Am I late?" "No," I said, meeting his gaze. "You're right on time." And for the first time in years I felt it. That shift. Not in them, in me. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I wasn't showing off or trying to belong. I was done chasing a seat at their table. Lucien turned to greet my mom. "Mrs. Rivera," he said warmly. "It's so nice to finally meet you." Her face. My God, her face. She blinked once, twice, then forced a tight-lipped smile. "Of course," she said, her voice an octave too high. "Welcome." He turned to my dad, who looked like he had just swallowed a lemon but managed a handshake. It was awkward. It was amazing. And it was only just beginning. Lucien hadn't even been in the room for a full minute, and already the entire atmosphere had shifted. People who hadn't looked twice at me all night were suddenly on their feet, whispering, staring, some with raised eyebrows, others with barely concealed awe. I glanced at Serena, the bride-to-be, half expecting her to be furious that the attention had momentarily shifted. But she simply raised her glass from across the room and gave me a subtle wink. That was one of the reasons I'd always liked her. Even when our mothers tried to pit us against each other growing up. She had her mother's smile, but none of her pettiness. Lucien didn't make a spectacle. He didn't give a speech. He didn't rush around shaking hands. He just stood beside me, confident, grounded, present. That, in itself, made people uncomfortable. They weren't used to someone like him not performing for their approval. My mom, to her credit, managed to hold her composure. Barely. She kept that tight-lipped smile plastered on her face while Lucien greeted her like a gentleman. She nodded, murmured something about finally meeting, and clutched her wine glass like it was the only stable thing in the room. My dad was slightly better at pretending. He shook Lucien's hand with a firm grip, asking something vague like, "So what line of aviation are you in?" In the same tone he used to interrogate my old SAT tutors. Lucien handled it perfectly. "Mostly consulting now," he replied. "Aviation logistics, infrastructure and emerging markets. Some R&D projects in the Gulf and Europe." That shut my dad up faster than I expected. He nodded like he understood, which I'm sure he didn't, and mumbled, "Sounds impressive." Nearby, two of my uncles, who had been loudly wondering earlier if my boyfriend was some guy from Craigslist, were suddenly very interested in aviation consulting. One of them even asked for Lucien's card, which he didn't have, of course. That made it even better. The beauty of Lucien's presence wasn't just in the optics. It was how calm he remained, how unshaken. He didn't come in with bravado. He didn't try to prove anything. He just was. And that made everything they said about me unravel quietly in real time. They called me aimless, delusional, selfish, immature. But there I was, standing beside a man who exuded nothing but quiet certainty. And more importantly, who chose me completely with no hesitation. For a moment I felt taller. The rest of the evening blurred into slow motion. Every time I turned, someone new was trying to talk to Lucien. He handled them graciously, asking questions about their careers, their families, even complimenting my cousin Rena's dance performance, which honestly had been more enthusiastic than skilled. I mostly watched. I watched my mother watching us, her eyes darting between Lucien and me, her mind scrambling for a narrative that could contain this version of her daughter. A version she hadn't accounted for. A version she couldn't control. That was when she pulled me aside. It was near the powder room, just down the hall from the ballroom, where the sound of jazz spilled in softly. "Elena," she said, "why didn't you tell us he was coming?" There was a slight tremble in her voice. Not anger. Something else. I couldn't quite name it yet. I raised my eyebrows. Would it have mattered? She opened her mouth, then closed it. Looked down at her heels. Then back at me. I didn't realize he was so serious. That word. Serious. Like the rest of my life up to this point had been an elaborate joke. Like Lucien showing up had suddenly legitimized me. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I smiled calm, cold. He's always been serious, Mom. You just never gave me the space to show you. Her face changed. Just a flicker. But it was there. It wasn't guilt. Not quite. It was something more fragile. Recognition, maybe. The start of it. We were interrupted before she could respond. Someone needed help with the cake cutting or the playlist or who knows what. She disappeared back into the party like nothing had happened. But I knew. I knew something had cracked. Lucien and I slipped out just after midnight. Not because we were uncomfortable, but because we didn't owe anyone an extended goodbye. He had meetings in Geneva the next morning, and I had a flight back to Barcelona in 2 days. As we walked out of the hotel lobby, I saw my parents standing by the valet station. My mother gave us a nod. My father a slight smile. Lucien waved politely. I didn't say anything. The car door closed behind me, and I exhaled for the first time all night. Lucien glanced over. You okay? Yeah, I said. Then paused. Better than okay. That was a lot. He nodded. You handled it better than I would have. I laughed. No, you just looked cooler doing it. He smirked. Always. We drove off into the night. But my mind stayed behind, in that ballroom, in that hallway with my mother, in all those tiny moments where the old narrative tried to reassert itself but couldn't. That was the moment I realized. I didn't want revenge anymore. Not in the traditional sense. I didn't want to make them feel small or stupid. I didn't need an apology, a toast, or even their approval. What I wanted was for them to see that I was never lost, never unstable, never flailing. I was growing. And that night, for once, they couldn't look away. The morning after the engagement party felt like waking up from a dream I hadn't expected to have. Lucien had left early for Geneva. I stayed behind at the hotel, curled under a comforter that smelled faintly of roses and old money. My phone was flooded with messages, some from cousins pretending they hadn't laughed at me the night before. Others from family friends who suddenly found my career fascinating. But the one message I didn't expect came from my mother. Just one sentence. Would you like to come by the house before you leave? There was no emoji, no passive-aggressive punctuation, just words. I stared at it for a long time, not because I was debating, but because part of me was terrified of what I'd find if I said yes. The house hadn't changed. Still the same 2-story colonial in Forest Hills, with ivy climbing too high on the left side and the doorbell that never quite worked. I'd spent most of my life inside those walls feeling like I was never enough, like every accomplishment was just a detour from the path they laid out. My mom greeted me at the door like she hadn't humiliated me less than 24 hours ago. Elena, she said, stepping aside to let me in. There's coffee. There was always coffee. I followed her to the kitchen where the smell of cardamom and dark roast hit me like a memory I hadn't invited. On the table were 3 things. A box with some of my old college things, a shawl I recognized from my grandmother, and an envelope. I thought you might want these, she said, not looking at me. I opened the envelope. Inside was a printed photo. Me and Lucien near the stage at the party. He had his arm around my waist. We were both smiling. She looked up when I didn't say anything. Serena sent it, she said. Said it turned out well. It did, I replied quietly. A pause. The kind that makes your ribs tighten. Then she said it. I may have misjudged. Not I was wrong. Not I'm sorry. Just misjudged. He seems thoughtful. That was all she could say. I nodded. He is. And we just sat there. 2 women who had fought for years. Each convinced the other didn't understand anything. And maybe we still didn't. But there was space now, uneasy, delicate, but real. Later that day, I returned to the hotel and collapsed onto the bed. I was emotionally gutted. Lucien called from Geneva that evening. How'd it go? Quieter than I thought, I said. Heavier than I expected. I figured. We didn't talk about the party after that. Not directly. There was no need. Over the next few weeks, small things changed. My dad sent me an article from Forbes. Reminds me of one of the projects you mentioned. Interesting read. My mom commented on an Instagram photo. Just a heart emoji. The first time she'd publicly acknowledged Lucien, and then came the invitation. A month later, I was contacted by a major conference organizer in Dubai. They were hosting a summit on innovation, branding, and cross-cultural entrepreneurship. They wanted me to speak, not as someone's daughter, not as someone's girlfriend, as me. I agreed on one condition. I'd like to invite 2 guests, I told the organizer. They'll need front row seats. They said yes. I sent my parents handwritten invitations, each sealed with a wax stamp. Inside I wrote, "You once asked if I was serious about my life. I'd like to show you what serious looks like." They didn't reply for 3 days. Then finally, a text from my mother. "We'll be there." Lucien picked them up from the airport himself. No helicopter this time, just our Tesla. He brought them to our home. A 3-bedroom apartment in downtown Dubai with floor-to-ceiling glass and a view of the city that made even my dad pause. They didn't say much during the tour, just took it all in. The summit took place at a luxury conference center near Business Bay. The air buzzed with energy, founders, CEOs, artists, and executives everywhere. Lucien was giving a talk on aviation logistics the next day. But that night, it was my name on the program. I walked out on stage in a tailored ivory pantsuit, my hair pulled back, no jewelry except for a single ring. And I told my story, not about the party, not even about Lucien. I talked about what it means to build something that no one else believes in, what it means to be underestimated, to be laughed at, and to keep going anyway. I saw my parents in the front row. My mother had tears in her eyes. My father, stoic always, clapped longer than anyone else. And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel like I was on trial. I felt seen. After the speech, people came up to congratulate me. Executives, journalists, a royal family aide. My parents stood off to the side, watching. Then quietly my father approached me. "You've done well," he said. And then, "I didn't see it before. But, you've built something." I nodded. That was it. That was all I needed. Not because it made me whole, but because I was already whole. This was just the confirmation that I had stopped waiting for a long time ago. The applause wasn't revenge. The view from my kitchen wasn't revenge. The real revenge was growing into the woman they never imagined I could become, and then letting them witness it, front row, no escape. After the summit, everything was quieter. Not in a bad way, just settled. There were no celebratory dinners, no emotional speeches, no teary reconciliation over a family meal. Just a lingering stillness, like the space between heartbeats when the music fades and you're not sure if it's over or just paused. My parents didn't extend their stay in Dubai. They had flights booked the next afternoon. Lucien offered to take them out for dinner that night, but my mother said she was tired. My father didn't argue, so we kept it simple. Lunch at a rooftop restaurant near the marina. Safe, scenic, neutral. I watched them during the meal. My father asked a few polite questions about my upcoming projects. My mother complimented the hummus. Neither of them mentioned the speech, or the audience, or the applause. It was like it didn't happen, except it had. And that was the shift. They didn't dismiss it. They didn't deny it. They simply didn't know how to process it. Not yet. I think that unsettled me more than anger would have. After they left, I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I didn't do anything dramatic. I sat on our balcony with a glass of mint tea and let the silence wrap around me like a blanket. Lucien joined me after a while, his shirt sleeves rolled up, eyes soft. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Just adjusting to being seen?" I laughed, low and honest. "Maybe. It's strange, you know? You spend your whole life trying to earn someone's approval, and then one day you realize you don't need it anymore. And instead of feeling triumphant, you feel empty, like the fight was what kept you moving, and now you have to relearn how to walk without pushing against something." The next morning, I opened my email and saw a new message from my mother. Subject: Family album. Body: Hi, can you send me the photos from the event? Especially the one with you and Lucien by the stage. I'd like to print it for the hallway. I stared at the screen. For the hallway. Not the fridge. Not a dusty drawer. The hallway, the place where guests walk through, where her friends pass during parties. The curated space. The Face the World wall. I replied simply, sure. I'll send them today. But inside something cracked. Not in pain. In peace. Later that week, I visited New York again briefly, a branding workshop at Columbia, a quick pitch meeting downtown. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't need to, but curiosity got the better of me. On my last day, I dropped by the house. The ivy on the left side of the house had finally been trimmed. The doorbell still didn't work. My mother opened the door with a surprised smile. You should have called. I was nearby, I said. She stepped aside. Come in. I was just finishing some tea. We sat in the kitchen. The same table. Same faint smell of spices and lemon cleaner. And then I saw it. In the hallway. A new frame. The photo she'd asked for. Lucien and me. Stage lights behind us. His arm around me. Both of us smiling. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. But she caught me looking. She didn't try to explain it. She just said, "It's a nice picture." And for once I didn't push. We talked about neutral things, weather, her garden, a recipe she wanted to try. When I got up to leave, she walked me to the door. "Elena," she said just as I turned the knob. I paused. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Looked down at her hands. Picked at a chipped nail. Then, "He seems like he really cares about you." My throat tightened. "He does," I said softly. She nodded once. "That's good." And that was it.
No confession.
No apology. No Hollywood ending. Just a cracked door. But it was enough. When I returned to Dubai, Lucien asked how it went. I smiled, leaned into him and said, "Quiet, but not empty." He pulled me close. "That's how you know it's real." And he was right. Because the loudest victories aren't the ones with fireworks. They're the ones that come wrapped in silence, like truth finally being heard, even when no one dares to speak it. 3 months after the summit, life moved on, at least on the surface. Lucien and I slipped back into our rhythm. Project deadlines. Late-night airport pickups. Brunches with too much espresso and not enough time. We were, as always, in motion. But I noticed things. Small things. My mother began texting me, not to ask where I was or what I was doing, but to share things. A photo of a flower from her garden. A recipe she'd finally perfected. An article she thought I'd like. It wasn't much, but it was consistent. Felt like reaching. My father sent Lucien an email. A polite thank you for your hospitality in Dubai. It was 2 sentences long and painfully formal, but Lucien responded with grace. And a picture of the view from our balcony. Then came spring. We had planned a short trip to New York, part business, part catching up with old friends. I didn't tell my parents right away. I didn't want to turn it into a thing. But one afternoon, I got a message from my mom. "If you're in town, stop by. I've made tamales." It was the most casual peace offering I'd ever seen. Lucien raised an eyebrow when I told him. "You think they're ready?" I shrugged. "I'm not sure I care anymore. But maybe I'm ready." We stopped by on a Sunday afternoon. No suitcases. No big announcements. Just a quiet knock on a door that hadn't changed but somehow felt less heavy. My dad answered. He was in socks and a polo shirt. That alone was jarring. "Elena," he said, stepping aside.
Come in."
Lucien extended his hand. My father didn't hesitate this time. The handshake was brief but warm. Inside, the kitchen smelled like childhood. Masa, cinnamon, warm air from a window that was actually open. My mother was in the kitchen, apron on, hair clipped back. She looked up when she heard me and gave a smile that didn't feel forced. "I hope you're hungry," she said. Lunch was simple.
Familiar.
Lucien complimented everything. My mom didn't deflect. My dad told a story that actually made Lucien laugh. Felt almost normal. But the moment came later. After dishes were cleared. After coffee. After Lucien went to the backyard to take a call. I was helping dry the dishes when my mother disappeared for a second. When she returned, she was holding something. A photo album. It wasn't new. The same red leather-bound one that had sat in the hallway cabinet for years. The one we only pulled out when distant relatives visited. She placed it on the kitchen table. "I updated it," she said. I blinked. "You what?" She opened it to the middle. Photos of Serena's engagement. Pages I recognized. Nothing surprising. Then she flipped again. And there it was. A page. Just for me. One photo of Lucien and me at the summit. One from the rooftop in Dubai. A shot of us walking through a market in Morocco that I had posted months ago. Under each picture in her handwriting little captions. Elena, Dubai Summit Elena and Lucien Marina walk. Building something real. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. Because this wasn't her saying she was wrong. This was her saying she saw me. She didn't look at me as I turned the pages. She just sipped her coffee like this was the most normal thing in the world. I reached the last photo, the one from the stage in Dubai. I looked up. You did this. She nodded once. I thought it was time. I swallowed. Hard. Mama. I started then stopped. What was I even trying to say? She didn't answer. Just reached over, gently touched my wrist. You've always done things your own way, she said. We didn't get it. Still don't most days. But I see you now. And that was it. Not a performance. Not a declaration. Just presence. The kind that fills the space louder than words ever could. I didn't cry then. I waited until Lucien and I were back in the car. I buried my face in his shoulder and he didn't ask. He just held me. Later he whispered, "What happened?" I smiled through tears. She put me in the album. And for once that was enough. Sometimes the loudest kind of love isn't screamed or posted online. It's a picture slipped into an old album. A caption written in quiet ink. A mother who never says, "I'm sorry," but finally puts you where you've always belonged. Right next to everyone else. And sometimes that's enough. If you've ever had to fight to be seen by family, by friends, by people who were supposed to love you no matter what, I see you. We all do. And maybe you'll never get the apology you deserve. But trust me, they feel the shift when you stop waiting for it. And that moment when you stop needing their permission is the moment you win. Have you ever had to prove your worth to someone who never believed in you? Drop your story in the comments. Let's give each other the validation we never got.